Welcome to the first Celebrate 250 Heritage Breeds and Flocks podcast. This month we're talking all about equine and heritage horses in history. And so we're delighted you've chosen to join us. We've got what I feel is a blue ribbon panel. My name is Les Odell. I'm communications manager with the Livestock Conservancy. And we're going to learn about horses, their role in American history that even predates our nation, and what their role is today. And so with us, we have three folks who have a diverse and impressive background in equestrian sciences and horses. And so we'll get started. We'll let each of them kind of tell us and their role and their background. Phil, let's start with you.
Well, I'm Phil Sponenberg, and I'm an emeritus professor of pathology and genetics at the vet school at Virginia Tech. And I've been working on conservation for over 50 years now. And it did, in fact, start with horses, especially Spanish horses, especially Choctaw horses. And the short story.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that you were involved in the founding of the Livestock Conservancy, our organization that is nearing its 50th anniversary. And you were instrumental in coming up with the conservation priority list and the parameters for inclusion on that list and that kind of thing. So Phil brings some real expertise to our discussion today. Mindy, tell us about you.
My name is Mindy Welch, and I am the Breeds Barn Manager at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington, Kentucky. We have roughly about 25 to 26 different breeds that we use to educate, entertain, and engage the visitors, most of which this is their first time ever getting to pet a horse, to know a horse, and get hands-on experience with horses.
Perfect, perfect. It's a great place. If you've never visited Kentucky Horse Park, it's worth a visit because it's very entertaining, it's fun, it's very educational as well. So, Mary, tell us about you.
I'm an anthropologist. I got my doctorate. My specialty is in Asia and economic anthropology, which doesn't have a whole lot to do with my horses, which are the great passion of my life. And at the moment, I have 50 Spanish colonial, mostly Choctaw Cherokee, but some Huasteca, Gilbert Jones lines, a touch of Ute, some Comanche, and they are the best horses I've ever had in my life. And so they are the grand passion. So,
Very
um,
good. Well, we appreciate you all sharing your passion. And let's just start. We can't talk about, let's set a baseline, if we will. Phil, perhaps you can kind of give us a background on how many horse breeds there are in North America, and what do we mean when we're talking about heritage breed horses?
Well, there's going to be hundreds of horse breeds because we like to import things. So heritage breeds, we consider those to be more local, long, historic breeds that, especially in North America, we're interested in those that either developed in America or have a long history of contribution to American life, so that in that sense they contribute to our heritage, so they're heritage breeds. And that contribution is an interaction of people, place, and animals, and it's that interaction that really provides kind of a full story. So for heritage breeds, there's fewer, but overall horse breeds, there's literally hundreds that are here now.
Is it possible to separate the history of the United States from horses?
Not really.
Okay,
Well, the
talk about
horses
that a little
were
bit.
well, the horses were the way we got from point A to point B. I mean, you could sail, but then you went from coast to coast, one coast to the other coast. And so once you had horses, then it became possible to uh, travel much more efficiently, much more effectively. And we forget that. So the Mary especially works with these Native American strains, and of course now our image of a Native American is usually some Plains Indian on horseback, but that wasn't what was happening. And so without the introduction of the horse into North America, people were stuck. you basically had to be no longer than a day's walk from a source of water because you wouldn't survive. And so it basically had transformed um, largely agricultural societies into horse-mounted societies that were based on more on hunting and especially kind of ceremonial warfare. We also forget that the importance of horse racing and all that that did. The last person that was actually inducted into the Absaroka warrior societies was Joe Medicine Crow, and that was because he was actually able to go down to a German encampment in Italy and steal all their horses while they were asleep, and so that was in World War II, and so it actually persists even up until then.
Mhm. Mary, how intertwined are horses with American history?
I think it was Clark Whistler wrote the essay on how horses had transformed the Lakota peoples. And you look all throughout the Americas, and as Phil said, we think of the Plains Indians, which are so glamorous and all this counting coup and I'm going to ride into my enemy's camp even if they are Nazi Germans. And but the other amazing place is the Southeast. And when those horses came from Spain, in 1493, they were not the ones that were on that particular voyage, because I understand there was a big parade down the streets to the dock, and then those gorgeous horses got put back in the stall, and they put some test horses on the first boat who had to live in slings until they got to the Americas. But after that, the Spanish just pumped horses into America. One, because Spanish culture required them for their own military laws and culture and so social and prestige, but they were coming. There were so many great horses. So assume the best horses in the world were the Spanish horses in the 15th and 16th century. They got shipped to the Americas. They set up breeding farms. Those horses came north. They're the remnants of what we see on all these Atlantic coast herds, but when the Southeast Indians got a hold of them, they were great breeders. They were the people who were developing all the vegetables that have transformed the Columbian Exchange. And they applied that same selection and ability to choose, select, and promote certain traits to the horses. And they were amazed. They still are amazing horses, even with the remnants that we have left. But they changed everything, and they changed their lives. They changed the participation of those people with what do you want to call them? Invaders, settlers, conquistadors, whatever we want to call them, the European based people, so that you see. The Choctaw, when you hear John and William Bartram talk about they're exploring for plants, and they just casually mention in their diaries, wow, these Choctaw ponies are really nice. And then, you have Thomas Jefferson was buying horses from the Chickasaw. His work horses were Chickasaw horses. Daniel Boone used Choctaw horses to go across the mountains. So, as Phil said, you couldn't have explored America without the horse.
Mhm.
And, the American native peoples, their lives were changed. The buffalo hunting was different. You could be nomadic without dragging your tent behind a dog. Um, it was major. Yeah.
Mindy, the horse still has a big cultural impact, just like it did in the 1500s and 1600s, doesn't it?
Yes, I would agree. So we do more of the nowadays, I guess, show side of the horses, even at the Kentucky Horse Park. So we technically have 16 or 15 different breeds that are on the Livestock Conservancy list, and a total of 27 within those 15 different breeds. So people get to see them now, depending on what barn they're in. We have 5 different barns. There's the mounted police barn, so we have an American Cream Draft in the police barn. So he actually patrols the park, does traffic, writes traffic control, directs traffic, writes tickets, does all the things that a mounted police horse does. Then we have some in the big barn that pull the trolley, and in our barn, he decided that the trolley was way too hard, and now he's learning how to be a riding horse. So they get to do a little bit of everything and show people what, the workhorses, the draft horses still pull, so they get to show people kind of what they were bred to do originally, but in the nowadays setting.
Mm-hmm. Phil, Mindy mentioned the conservation priority list. Talk to us a little bit for our visitors, our guests who are not familiar with that, what that list is and why it's important.
That list is the result of kind of a huge endeavor. And the goal is to list the breeds by their relative risk of extinction. And so that's why it's called Conservation Priority List. And so the main categories are, critical, endangered, and then threatened and recovering. And that's where we hope to get everything is finally recovering. Some breeds face different challenges and they end up on the list for different reasons. But usually it's because they've lost their job. They've lost their job, they've lost their site. So just like wild species lose their environment, and basically the horse breed can lose its environment, and then it becomes endangered, and then it ends up on our conservation priority list. And that list has criteria, based on the risk, which is usually just the numeric number, the number within the breed, but also things like geographic distribution or other special risks that a breed may face.
Give me some examples. You talk about horses that have lost their jobs or lost their environment. Give me some examples of those breeds and what's happened.
Well, Mindy mentioned the American Cream Draft Horse, and so we don't use draft horses as widely as we did. Now, certain communities certainly do. When they were talking earlier, I was reminded of my father. And so this is only one generation removed. When he was 8 years old, they lost the farm. And so they did have a truck, but they also had to load up all of their possessions on a horse-drawn wagon to go to the next farm. And so that's only one generation removed. And so the way we've used horses has changed. And so when those changes come, I was thinking about Rocky Mountain horses this morning. These are gaited riding horses, usually from the Appalachians, despite the name. And so Eastern Kentucky. And, if you were to go from point A to point B and you wanted to be comfortable, you had a gaited riding horse, and that's how you got from point A to point B. And so things like that. Mary mentioned some of the Native American strains. If you wanted to go hunt buffalo, you needed a reliable horse, and it had to be able to get out of the way of a bison that was going to hurt you. And so, you know, that whole system's really, really changed. And, I mean, as recently as the 1930s, some of the Comanches would actually go out and hunt the bison, but that no longer happens.
Mhm.
But you do find horses that have that, oh yeah, you think you're a big buffalo, but my human is telling me we're good. And I still see that attitude in some of these Phil, and that's the remnants of their human affiliation that they did lose their, we don't have buffalo. We do have some buffalo in Virginia, but we don't hunt them on horseback. But I have horses. If I was like, okay, we're going in for that, they'd be like, this is so cool. I'm glad we're doing something new today.
Mhm.
And that
So,
human affiliation that came, especially with, I hate to keep saying it, the southeastern tribes,
mhm.
is part of what, when you have a horse, if you said we're jumping off the Empire State Building, They'd be like, okay, if you really want to.
Mhm.
That's bred in. And it's such a great trait that you just want to keep it going.
Mhm. So it's a sense of loyalty, isn't it?
It's a human affiliation that we're in this together.
It's partnership.
How do we teach about those partnerships and those qualities of horses that maybe aren't utilized the way that we used to use them?
So our second show, which we call the Equine Academy, is more of a training aspect with your riders mic'd up, and we talk about how you build trust. So we have new horses come in constantly. We're constantly trying to find the right horse for us, just because not everybody wants to be pet by 500 people, 4 to 5 times a day or 4 to 5 times a week. So we talk about how we partner them up with really essentially the horse picks their rider. It doesn't really go to level of riding. It goes to who connects to that horse better, because essentially you're going to have a happier horse if they connect to their rider. So it's really important for us to make sure there is that connection. Now, we don't have hours to bond with the horse, but they have some sort of level of connection and trust with their handler to go, because I don't know if you've ever been to the horse park. Um, our arena can be a little intimidating. It's surrounded by bleachers. It's very closed in. Bleachers are very loud when somebody drops their cell phone on it. And then we have school groups. Some of our school groups are 375 kids at one time. So the energy in and of itself that brings on, some of our quiet horses are like, oh my God, what is going on? But when they trust their handler and their partner, they relax a little bit better and instill the trust in them to get the job done and be like, it's okay. They're not monsters. They're just children. They're here to pet you and give that experience. And a lot of times people will see the horses in our display and they want that breed. They see how quiet it is, how it handles the situation. And that's kind of how we hope to help the horse world and get them introduced to a variety of breeds.
Mhm. Mhm. Mindy kept using the phrase partnership and that kind of thing too, and Phil used that same thing. Mary, how has that partnership been influential in the development of American culture and American history over the last 250 years?
Well, when you look at, I'll go to the Southeast tribes again, since that's where most of my horses are based. But when you were a Choctaw child at birth, a Choctaw baby was given a horse, a cow, and a pig. And they developed their herds so that when they were ready to start their own family, branch of the family, they had animals, livestock. And the Choctaw women would put their babies on the horses before the kids could walk. So think of this. And the women were managing the horses. They were picking up the deer skins. The men would use the horses in war, but the horses were sort of a woman's job. And given the way the inheritances worked, they were selecting. And so if you're a mother, what are you going to pick? A horse that you can put your kid on and go do everything and not have it roll in the dirt with your kid tied to the back. And I see it in my horses. You'll have a horse that can jump anything. They love to fox hunt. They'll jump. When people first see them, they're like, can that thing jump? Well, yeah, they can. They can jump anything a 16, 17 hand horse can. But they will slow down. They will see a child and they become a child's horse. I can show you a video of he was my personal horse, a field trial horse who's could always be in the front. And he's being led by his new owner, who's a 4-year-old boy. And you can see him like timing his step to the 4-year-old. Or, you have the stallions react to children. These Choctaw horses and Cherokee horses, especially, see a child, you feel their heart rate change. They recognize it. It's genetically somehow transferred that these horses know what a kid is. And it's wonderful. I can show you pictures of two horses who are doing endurance, and you put a young kid who's learning to do a 50-mile endurance race, and the horses love it. They're just zooming along. One little girl who's a brilliant rider has her arms out like she's flying, smiling at the camera, and they just get it. The horse is like, I have to take care of this kid. If they start to fall off, you'll sometimes see them shift a shoulder up to say, okay, you're slipping. Come on, get over there. Which, as an old lady, I'm glad they do that for me too. But it's and the other thing is I see horses pick their human. They'll come up and they'll go like, oh, this is the person I'm going home with. I'm not leaving. And we sort of joke about it. Like, I'm fortunate enough to have people I trust come back for their third, their fourth, their fifth horse, or to get the next kid in the family a horse. And you watch the horses pick the family. They're like, oh, these are for me. And there is a different level of communication happening. And I don't mean this in the kind of woo woo way. I'm just saying you feel it and you know it.
We've talked a lot about the role of horses, particularly with the indigenous tribes, particularly in the Southeast. But how has the role of horses in America, and I think particularly in agriculture, how has that changed over the last century and a half?
If you go way back, um, it actually turns out before you have good roads, that most work was done by oxen. But after you get good roads, then a horse makes a whole lot of sense for getting loads from point A to point B. And so obviously, before mechanization, and mechanization really takes off not until the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, as late as that. Before that, you needed horses to get from point A to point B, whether it was just you riding or whether it was moving loads on roads. And so when we think of draft horses, there's really two different main uses. One of those is going to be road work, where you're hauling loads,
Mhm.
like the Clydesdales from Budweiser hauling beer wagons, or farm work where you're plowing. And that can take a slightly different horse. And of course, those roles have changed. Now we still have in the United States communities that avidly use horses, and we think of the Amish and the Mennonites especially, but there's others. And the Suffolk horse retains that use in North America as a common sense draft horse, especially for logging or for agriculture. And it's interesting because the same breed in England now is more for show. They do like to show their heavy horses. So you have one breed filling both niches, but especially in the United States, they're not usually used for show as much as some of the other heavy horses. They're still used in the field.
Mhm. But we might mention that even though the Suffolk is still used quite frequently, it still remains on the conservation priority list.
Correct. And then that's largely because that's a fairly, how many slots are there,
Mhm.
basically. And
Mhm.
it's,
I think too about I can't think of horses without thinking about the American West and how the horse was iconic in the development of not only Western expansion but the cattle industry and other things. Could you touch on that a little bit, Phil?
well, they're, we actually, yes, the horse was essential, especially in Western ranges, for managing cattle and also sheep, goats, and pigs. That comes from the Spanish tradition. And in fact, much of the vocabulary, much of the ability, much of the techniques actually come from Spain. because that was much more the case. Now the Irish also had a history of using horses in cattle management, but between the Irish and the Spanish, and those were the main ones. And so when we think of managing cattle out on the range, we do think of the need for capable horses. And Mary was talking about the Southeast strains, which were moved to Oklahoma. And one of the reasons some of the ranchers in Oklahoma preferred Choctaw horses is that you could use one horse all day, unshod, and some of the other competition couldn't quite hold up to that use all day long. And so even today, where they're used extensively, some of these heritage breeds actually can hold their own. And that Mary talked about the issue of these horses liking to work with people. Some of these horses, they'll say a horse has a lot of cow. What they mean is it doesn't look like a cow. It really, 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 really likes to work cattle. And there are horses that learn how to work cattle and they love it so much. So when that horse gets too old to ride, they will still have that horse go out. They will take that horse unridden, and that horse will work the cattle all by itself because that horse really, really likes to work cattle.
Mhm.
Or they will chase the foxhounds back to the pack in Virginia. You know, if I have a horse in the field, he's like, "Oh, they're calling you, let's go." And the masters of foxhounds laugh because the stallions will chase their hounds back towards them. It's like, I want to work. Just give me something to do.
Mhm.
And it is a remnant of like, let's herd cattle. Well, we have to herd these stupid hounds who don't know what the horns mean.
Right. Right. Now we've not touched on, Mindy, we've not touched yet on the horse as an athlete, but that's a significant role too in American culture, right?
Yes. So even here at the horse park, we have a competition side. So we have the hunter jumpers, we have the show jumping, eventing, the Western disciplines. You'll see more of the English disciplines here. I think it's just area wide. There's smaller amounts of the Western disciplines, but right now we're getting ready to have a big Grand Prix for the show jumping. Everybody's moving in, and some of these guys will be here for weeks. The show series are 2, 4, 6 weeks long, and they basically are here at the horse park for that long, which is pretty impressive in and of itself, just because they're showing multiple times a day. They're doing pretty significant work, so they've got to be fit and ready for their job to do it and to do it well. And some of these horses are top quality horses that are coming through here
Sure.
with Land Rover, the Olympic riders, Boyd Martin, all of those high level riders. It's pretty impressive.
And I think we've touched on this, but Phil, kind of from a 30,000 foot view, how has the American horse population changed over the last 200 or 250 years?
uh, Dramatically. Originally, you would have had a heavy Spanish influence in the Southeast up through the Carolinas and Tennessee, and then anything west of the Mississippi. It gets a little more complicated uh, northeast of there, so that in Canada and in the Maritimes, you have a lot of French influence,
Mhm.
and those horses actually still persist in the Canadian horse and also in the feral horses on an island out there in the Atlantic. And then in the English colonies, you would have more of a thoroughbred influence, changing things, and all these things were put together and blended. And then you also have some heavy horses imported from the Low Countries and also from England, and so that's going to change. And then that whole picture is going to change because the the American cavalry prefers taller horses, and so they introduce coach horses, French coach horses especially, and thoroughbreds onto the Western ranges, and that's going to change what's out there. And then we get the development of multi-purpose horses such as the original Morgan, which works well as a short course racehorse, also as a family riding horse, also as a farm horse. So if you had one horse that needed to do everything, that was the horse that you had. And that model becomes very, very popular again for crossbreeding the Spanish horses out west. And that is going to develop into the quarter horse. And you can actually think of the quarter horse, the paint, and the Appaloosa as kind of a triumvirate of breeds that share that mixed ancestry, but directed towards, especially for ranch work.
Mindy, do you find that you have guests at the Kentucky Horse Park who are just kind of blown away just by the diversity within equine populations that there are all these? I mean, I'm sure there are folks who thought a horse was a horse and that was it.
Absolutely. Actually, just yesterday we had, or the day before, we had a couple that were just blown away with the amount of breeds and what they can do. Whether it's trotting, I think our guys were trotting over a cavaletti and jumping like a little 2-foot jump bareback. Just the amount of different things. And we have a draft horse. So we have a draft horse out there riding. We have a Chincoteague pony, a Lipizzan. So we have this hodgepodge of breeds. And then you have the Welsh. So we had a Welsh cob and a Welsh pony. So people are fascinated that the fact that they're the same breed, they're just different sections. So they can't understand why the little 10-hand pony that everybody thinks is a baby horse because she's so little, and the 14-hand Welsh cob are within the same breed. So it definitely is very eye-opening for a lot of people to experience the horse and just see the variety and the variety of breed we have.
So why is it important to educate folks about all the different breeds?
It's kind of with the whole Conservancy. You want people to continue on, and especially nowadays, these it's more of, I would say, a hobby, and it's a very expensive hobby. So you've got to have that love for the horse. And some of the girls that I have working for me, they're in college, but they came to the horse park when they were 8 years old and found the love for the horse and have always wanted to work there when they grew up. And here I think they're 19, 20, and their dreams are coming true, all because they visited a place like the horse park, fell in love with the horse and get to see what they can do. And then so you're living that generation on. And then the horses, a lot of times some of our horses are owned by the state and then they retire, and the girls that rode them 10 years ago fell in love with them, and then they take them home for their kids to learn on. So it's kind of it's important for people to see the horses, bond with the horses, just get that drive, and then that translates into family, and hopefully continuing the horse breeds on.
And Phil, why is that important that we continue these breeds, particularly some of them that appear on the conservation priority list?
Well, it preserves diversity, and so there's different horses excel at different things. One thing that America can claim is it's the best in the world are the standard bred trotters. There is no better trotter in the world. And so when other countries have their own trotter, what they'll do is they'll actually organize the races. So you have standard bred races, and then you have, in the case of like the Finn horse, you have Finn horse races because the Finn horse races can't out trot the standard bred. And you need to keep both of them because they actually do kind of serve different roles. But it's this idea of different roles, different purposes. You don't, one size doesn't fit all. You need a specific horse for a specific use. Now, there's another more abstract, scientific, compelling reason for this. The ancestor of horses is extinct, and 10,000 years ago, if you looked out your window, you would have seen elephants, rhinoceri, horses, and camels. And you look out your window now, you don't see that. And that's a really, 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 really short period of time that we have gotten rid of big animals. And so there's actually a compelling reason just for overall biodiversity, forget using them. It's just that each one of these breed packages saves a little bit of that equine genome that's important because you cannot go into the wild and you cannot find the horse that was actually domesticated to give us this wide array of horses today.
Mary, and so it's important not only from a scientific background, but from a social one too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And horses and Homo sapiens are connected. I think that's why they're so effective as equine therapy. It, um, it's a job because your heart goes in sync. They get it. The number of people who want to come out and help me do horse chores because they feel so good is very charming and nice, but it works. You feel it and they feel you. Um it's good for us to be around them, and but they also need things to do. Their athleticism is critical, and it's one of the fun things in my breed is seeing which horse is going to excel at which equine sport. And we want those sports. If you're Mindy, I'm sure you know, as you were saying, all the 10-year-old girls out at the bar. It's changing their life. And, would you rather have a horse or a boyfriend? They'd rather have the horse. And their parents would rather they have the horse. So I think there is a deep connection. And I mean, I've had thoroughbreds, I've had Arabs, I've had quarter horses, I've had Tennessee walking horses. And the amazing thing with this rare breed is they are the most athletic as well as the most intelligent horses. It is doing things with them that is so compelling, and that they want to do them with you. It's very flattering. Gee, you're mending the fence. Can I hang out with you? Sure.
But
Can I help you?
let me ask
That's
this then.
right.
So what challenges are facing are modern day horse breeders facing to keep some of these breeds going, thriving? I'm sure there are a variety of issues and challenges that they're facing.
It's expensive. You can't eat your mistakes. If you, you know, well, we don't eat our mistakes. I suppose I could, but that would be a little difficult. Keeping a group of stallions is a lot of work, and not everybody, you can't just send the 10-year-olds out. Some 10-year-olds you can send out and say, would you move that stallion over here? But testosterone is something that needs to be managed. And it, it, it's a commitment. It's a major commitment. I'm in my 70s, so I'm looking to slowly unwind my herd and set up with younger breeders. And knowing, who are you going to trust these horses to? Which people are committed so that when there's 2 feet of snow, they're going to walk out there and take care of the horses is an issue. Uh,
What about from a scientific standpoint, Phil?
And what there's a host of challenges. A huge challenge is just we talk about genetic management, and that means, basically, how do you organize that population so that you're not likely to lose anything? And actually, the marsh tacky horses of the Carolina coast are a good example of that because it's a fairly recent conservation effort, and about 80% of the breed was in the hands of one person. And it's a rare breed, so each one of those horses is important. But there were some horses that came from some of the islands off the coast of South Carolina, and it may only be a horse or two horses from this island, a horse or two horses from this island, and that's where most of your genetic variation is. So the Conservancy, especially through Jeanette Behringer, was able to organize specific matings. And so we had mares that were in their 20s that never foaled, and we had stallions in their 20s that had never produced a foal, and now we have foals from them, and so we're able to go on. We did the same thing with the Choctaw horses, especially with Mary's work, and she actually used my stallion, um, who was from a rare line within the Choctaw horses, and no longer is that line that much rare because what Mary and some others did to make sure that he had a contribution that was commensurate with his rarity and what he offered to the breed.
And that it's working. It's a real breeding plan. It's not just, oh, I think I'll try that one over there. Or, so and so has a stud down the street. Let's try that. It's thinking about what we're producing and where we're going to go with it that will keep them going.
Mhm.
And
Where
the
are we
challenge,
going, Mindy? Where are we going? What's the future hold for horses in America?
Well, hopefully a very long and prosperous future uh, is what we hope to continue. And I think just by the continued education that everybody is doing on all aspects of the horse, whether you're a breeder, um, on the conservancy, the scientist. I think it's just really important to continue that for futures to come.
Okay. Okay. And Phil, if you had to sum it up, what we've talked about and talk about the importance of what we do and the importance of horses in American history and American society today, how would you do that? I mean, that's a big task.
well, I mean, no horse, no America, basically. Um, so, they were essential, and they were essential throughout human history. They were essential throughout our history, and that's true of whatever community you want to talk about. So obvious connections to the Amish and the Mennonites, obvious connections to the Plains tribes, but it's these other connections where it's, the Southeast tribes, which is a surprise, where it's the Florida cattle ranchers, where it's a surprise, where it's the Newfoundland ponies, where it's a surprise, and yet it made the difference between human survival and human success or failure. And basically, if you fail, we don't know about you anymore. But if you succeeded, then yes, you're here, and it's this companion that brought you here, and that you used to help assure your survival that was essential for that.
Perfect. Mary, any final thoughts as we wrap up our discussion of heritage horses in history?
Oh, well, I would encourage people who come to Mindy's and find a breed to get into it, jump in with both feet, and start swimming hard. It's so fulfilling, and there is the strategy. I said, make a plan. There is the luck that sometimes all the genes come together, and there's heartbreak, somebody breaks their leg, or you're like, oh, you guys are so curious, but do not jump in the middle of the hay feeder, please, because I have no idea how to get you out. Um, but it's worth it. It's a commitment. Um, it's a lot of work, and you get repaid in the satisfaction when they all come running across the field, um, just because you're there. So I would encourage people to do it. I would encourage them to be thoughtful. It's it's worth it, and you're hooked. It's
Mindy, I don't know if you're paying Mary for her commercial for Kentucky Horse Park or not, but certainly
going to
tell us how we
Kentucky
can learn
Horse
more and how
Track.
we can visit and where you guys are located.
So we are located in Lexington, Kentucky. the horse capital of the world. You can go on kyhorsepark.com and it will tell you all about everything that's happening, whether that's on the competition side or on the tourism side. We also have a campground. So we have a little bit of everything for everyone. So definitely encouraged to look it up. That's kyhorsepark.com and come out and visit us.
Perfect. And that's going to wrap up our first of the series of podcasts as part of our Heritage Herds and Flocks in History podcast program. We're so delighted that you have joined us for this. We want you to learn more about what we do at the Livestock Conservancy. You can visit our website at www.livestockconservancy.org. And you also can learn more about what we're doing to celebrate America's birthday at livestockconservancy.org/250. For our guests, I want to thank Phil, Mindy, and Mary for their help today. I'm Les Odell. Join us again next time as we explore more of our heritage herds and flocks in history.